Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're doing a really deep, detailed dive into a creature you absolutely recognize, but probably don't truly know. I'm talking about the ring-tailed lemur, or lemur cata. Sure, they're beloved pop culture icons, right? You've seen them everywhere in animated movies and nature docs. But once you look beyond the screen, this highly intelligent, incredibly complex strepsirrhine, meaning wet-nosed, primate is just an absolute marvel of evolution. They lead completely dramatic lives over on the island of Madagascar, and today we're going to uncover the gritty, fascinating reality behind all that fame.
I mean, when you picture a lemur, you instantly see that long, black and white banded tail, right? It's iconic. But what if I told you that their society is actually ruled by fiercely aggressive matriarchs? Or that the males settle disputes through literal, actual chemical warfare? Or that recent science has totally shattered the old myth that they're just the less intelligent cousins of monkeys and apes? Get ready, because we are about to seriously challenge some preconceived notions here. Okay, let's dive into this. First, we'll meet the famous lemur, look at their anatomy and unique traits, explore matriarchs and stink fights, see why they're smarter than you think, and finally, discuss their fight for survival. Section 1. Meet the famous lemur. Let's move to and see how this builds. To really understand this animal, we have to contextualize its deep history and its daily life in the extreme environment of southern and southwestern Madagascar, which is, by the way, the only place on Earth where they live in the wild. The lemur story is one of spectacular isolation. Between 50 and 80 million years ago, a tiny ancestral population arrived in Madagascar via a single ocean rafting event, literally just clinging to floating vegetation. Over tens of millions of years, they evolved and branched out with zero competition from other primates. Around 26.1 million years ago, the family Lemuridae officially branched off. Fast forward a bit to about 2,000 years ago, and humans finally arrive on the island. This marks a drastic turning point. And that brings us to a pretty devastating reality. By 2017, the wild population of the ring-tailed lemur had absolutely plummeted down to an estimated 2,000 individuals. Surviving in Madagascar is no joke, especially given the harsh environmental conditions there. The ring-tailed lemur is what we call an opportunistic omnivore. They actually spend way more time on the ground than any other lemur, foraging for dozens of different plant species, and yeah, even spiderwebs, chameleons, and dirt. But during the brutal dry winter season, they rely heavily on the tamarind tree, which is known natively as the kilu tree. In fact, when resources are really scarce, this one tree can make up 50% of their entire diet. It is literally an absolute lifeline for the troop. Section 2. Anatomy and unique traits. So let's shift our focus over to the bizarre, highly specialized physiological adaptations that help this semi-terrestrial primate thrive in those rough, spiny scrub and gallery forests. Have you ever caught a lemur's eyes glowing in the dark? That's because of the tapetum lucidum. It's a reflective layer behind the retina that massively enhances night vision. Now here's the weird part. Ring-tailed lemurs are strictly diurnal, meaning they're only active during the day. Yet, unlike most day-active primates, they just kept this night vision characteristic, a trait they still share with other strepsirrhine primates. And this brilliantly illustrates one of their most fascinating anatomical features, the tooth comb. The lemur's lower front teeth, specifically 4 incisors and 2 canines, are exceptionally narrow, finely spaced, and point almost straight forward right out of their mouth. It literally looks and functions exactly like a comb. They use this built-in grooming tool to rake through each other's thick fur to remove debris and bugs, and they also use it to scrape sticky sap and gum straight off tree bark. They even have this specialized fibrous plate under their tongue just to keep the tooth comb clean. I mean, how cool is that? But the anatomical quirks definitely do not stop there. First up, they have a specialized toilet claw on their second toe. Yes, you heard me right, a toilet claw. It's basically Mother Nature's ultimate grooming tool for scratching areas their mouth just can't reach. Next, their pelage, or their fur, is so incredibly dense that veterinarians actually noted it can clog up electric clippers. Because they spend so much time just walking on the ground, their hands and feet are long, smooth, and leathery. And finally, they are absolutely covered in scent glands on their chests, their wrists, and their anogenital regions, which actually brings us perfectly to our next topic. Section 3. Matriarchs and stink fights. If you've been thinking lemurs are just peaceful, zen-like creatures hanging out in the trees, well, you're in for a bit of a shock. Their social structure is incredibly complex and surprisingly aggressive. So the crucial point is this. Ring-tailed lemur society is a strict matriarchy. Females socially dominate the males in literally all circumstances, and that includes getting priority access to food. The females are the absolute core of the troop. They defend the territory, they initiate mating, and they stay in their NATO group, the group they were born into, their entire lives. Males, well, on the other hand, they're entirely submissive. They're pushed to the physical periphery of the group, and they have to pack up and migrate between different troops every few years. Because of this really marginalized status, males rely heavily on scent marking just to establish their own separate hierarchy. All of this creates a totally fascinating juxtaposition in their daily behavior. Like in the chilly mornings, you'll find entire troops acting as these Zen sunbathers. They just sit upright, resting on their tails, arms extended out in a full lotus position, exposing their soft white bellies to the sun to warm up. It's incredibly peaceful to watch. But when tensions rise, especially during the breeding season, they completely transform into aggressive jump fighters. When they're threatened, they will literally leap up into the air and strike at each other with their sharp upper canine teeth and short nails. It is intense. But, actual physical violence is risky, so the males have developed this highly ritualized form of chemical warfare to establish dominance without, well, killing each other. Welcome to the art of the stink fight. Okay. Here's how it works. First, a male secretes a foul-smelling, brown, sticky paste from those glands on his chest and wrists. Second, using a little horny spur on his wrist, he scrapes and squeezes these glands to thoroughly anoint his long, bushy tail with the scent. And finally, he arches his tail over his head and vigorously wafts that pungent aroma directly into his rival's face. The males will literally just stare each other down, waving their stinky tails until one of them simply backs down and retreats. It is such an amazing, non-lethal way to establish the hierarchy. Section 4. Smarter than you think. For a really long time, strepsirrhine primates like lemurs were totally dismissed by the scientific community as the dim-witted, primitive cousins of monkeys and apes. But that historical assumption? It's entirely wrong. So why were they considered unintelligent for so long? Basically, bad science. You see, early cognitive tests were designed specifically for simians, so monkeys and apes. Simians naturally love to pick up and play with non-food objects using their hands. Lemurs just don't do that in the wild. They tend to investigate objects with their noses or their mouths instead. Plus, early lab tests isolated the lemurs. And because they're so fiercely social, being all alone caused them to act hysterically. So, when an experiment required an isolated, stressed-out lemur to spontaneously manipulate a tool with its hands, of course it naturally failed. Now, what's really interesting about this side is that when researchers finally designed tests tailored to the lemur's actual ecology, studies at places like the Duke Lemur Center and the Madagascar City Lemur Reserve revealed some truly astounding intelligence. They proved that ring-tailed lemurs can organize internal memory sequences without language. They can even understand simple arithmetic operations. And even though they don't naturally use tools in the wild, when they're trained, they don't just pick any random tool. They actually select tools based on functional qualities, like ease of use, over mere aesthetics. They possess complex reasoning skills entirely on par with monkeys, which is just incredible. Section 5. The fight for survival. We've seen just how remarkable, intelligent, and socially complex these animals are, which brings us to our final and definitely most sobering topic. I need to lower the energy here for a moment because the data surrounding their conservation status is truly alarming. The ring-tailed lemur is fighting a multi-front war, and unfortunately, humans are entirely to blame. Over the last 2,000 years, an estimated 90% of Madagascar's original forest cover has been completely destroyed. The primary drivers here are slash-and-burn agriculture and the extraction of hardwoods for fuel and lumber. And on top of that massive habitat loss, these lemurs are locally hunted for bushmeat and captured for the illegal exotic pet trade. As if that wasn't enough, they also face severe predation from invasive species brought by humans, specifically feral dogs and forest cats. 2,000. Just let that number sink in for a second. Because of the intense pressures we just discussed, field studies in 2017 estimated that there are only about 2,000 ring-tailed lemurs left in the wild. Despite being the most recognizable primate on the island, literally the flagship species of Madagascar, their wild population is in a terrifying freefall. And all of this leads us to a really bizarre and tragic paradox. In the wild, they are highly endangered, just clinging to life in these shrinking, fragmented forests. But in captivity, they are absolutely thriving. Because they reproduce so readily and adapt so well to captive care, there are well over 2,500 ring-tailed lemurs in zoos and reserves worldwide right now. They are, in fact, the most common of all captive primates. So to put that into perspective, there are literally more ring-tailed lemurs living behind enclosures than there are running free in the wild. Which leaves us with this final, provocative question. Will the world's most recognizable primate soon exist only behind glass? We've explored how brilliant, quirky, and fiercely social these animals are today. They're a flagship species, representing the incredible, unique biodiversity of Madagascar. Now, reintroduction from captivity is possible, but without stopping the habitat destruction, there will literally be no wild left to return them to. It's a stark reminder of our responsibility to the natural world. Thank you for joining me on this really deep dive into the true life of the ring-tailed lemur. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and I'll catch you in the next Explainer.